Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of Draco Veritas. So I hope everyone's been enjoying the longer version so far. Some of these chapters are extremely long in, this last book here. But for this chapter, I do think that we have some trigger warnings. And I think from here on in, we're going to have a lot of trigger warnings. Just because it's going to get darker and darker and darker. So, yeah, if you are extremely sensitive to coercion, sexual themes, or, just general, misleading type stuff, as well as gaslighting, then this whole book is not going to be for you, truthfully, honestly. I probably should have said that at the very beginning when I started this, but yeah, the farther we go, the more messed up it's going to get. So if that is not your cup of tea, you might want to sit this one out. But anyway, without further ado, let us just get right into it. Chapter 7. Burning the Boats. The sky outside Dumbledore's office window was pale gray, streaked with darker gray clouds. Hermione kept her eyes apathetically fixed on it while she waited for the headmaster to arrive. She was exhausted and felt slightly dizzy. Lying awake in her bed, she had been absolutely dreading breakfast. But to her relief, McGonagall had knocked on her door that morning and had requested that she come straight to Dumbledore's office. It was the second knock of the day, as, earlier that evening, Harry had knocked on her door, and she'd opened it, taken one look at him, and shut it in his face. He'd come to apologize, she knew, but didn't want to hear it, and wondered vaguely if she ever would. The door opened behind her, and she heard someone come into the room. A throat was cleared, and a voice spoke. It was Dumbledore, as she'd known it would be. "I'm afraid I need to speak with you, Miss Granger." Hermione turned and looked listlessly at the headmaster. He moved to stand behind his desk, looking very grave indeed. "Please come and sit down." Hermione nodded. She had no idea how much the professors knew about the events of the day before. Not much, she imagined, but judging from the look on Dumbledore's face, perhaps he knew more than she suspected. At another time this would have withered her with humiliation, but now she was beyond the point of caring. She went towards the seat that Dumbledore had indicated, in front of his desk, and sat down, clasping her hands in her lap. "What did you want to talk to me about, Professor?" she asked. Dumbledore took a seat behind his desk and regarded her gravely over the top of his gold-rimmed spectacles. "A rather serious matter, I'm afraid," he said gently. "Normally I would not call you to discuss the private business of another student, even a close personal friend of yours." "I know," she said, and kept her eyes fixed on his desk. "I assume you want to talk to me about Harry." There was a short silence. Finally, Dumbledore spoke, still gently. "No, Miss Granger. I wanted to talk to you about Mr. Weasley." She raised her eyes slowly, and the kindness she saw in his expression almost undid her. "About Ron?" she whispered. He nodded. "Mr. Weasley will be leaving us indefinitely," he said. The room seemed to tilt crazily around her, and she grabbed tightly at the arms of the chair. "What?" "He has resigned as head boy," said Dumbledore, and glanced down. She followed his gaze. and only then did she realize that the shiny square she had noted earlier was a badge. Ron's head boy badge, to be precise. It was upside down, and she could see the inscribed lettering where his name was printed, backwards. I talked to Mr. Weasley at length about the events that have transpired recently. Rest assured that I could have compelled him to stay if I wished, but I saw no point in it, Dumbledore said. I hope he will want to return once the holidays are over. No, Hermione whispered, staring at the silver badge on the desk. He can't leave. He can't. Headmaster, Do you know if he has left yet? Dumbledore regarded her with cautious alarm. He went to clean out his room and to collect his belongings, he began, and might have added something else, but Hermione did not want to hear it. She leapt up from the chair, then turned on her heel and ran out of the room, leaving Dumbledore staring after her. The door to Ron's room was closed, but not locked. Hermione flung it open and stepped inside. Her heart sank. The room was bare. The Chudley Cannon's posters had been stripped down from the walls, and the trunk was gone from the foot of the bed. The patchwork duvet cover that Mrs. Weasley had made for Ron's 5th year was also gone, and the bed looked as impersonal as a hospital cot. The only sign that Ron Weasley had once lived here was a small object tucked into the frame of the mirror that hung on the wall by the window. Moving slowly, Hermione crossed the room and gently pried the object out of the frame. It was a photograph, not a wizarding one, but one that had been taken with her own Muggle camera. It showed herself in her school robes, standing between Ron and Harry, a hand on each of their shoulders. They all looked happy and smiling. Staring at the photo, she felt a fist clench at her heart. The door behind her opened, and she spun around. It was Ginny, and she was talking to someone behind her. If you want to look one more time to make sure you haven't forgotten anything, she was saying, then we could... Ron, Hermione thought numbly. She stood frozen in place. The rest of Ginny's words were lost on her, as Ron came into the room after his sister. Unlike Ginny, he saw her instantly. His eyes went straight to hers across the room, and for a long moment they stared at each other in silence. Ginny, said Ron very quietly. Ginny broke off and turned to follow his gaze. When she saw Hermione, she looked surprised, but not angry. Hi, she whispered. Hermione nodded, feeling unable to force a sound past her tight throat. It doesn't look like you left anything behind, Ginny said, and glanced around quickly, then back at her brother. We should probably just... The hitch in Hermione's throat loosened. You left this, she said, and held out the photo to Ron, who only looked at it. It was Ginny who moved to take it, but Hermione retracted her hand. Please, she said imploringly to Ron. I need to speak with you. All right, he said in a remote voice. I'll talk to you. Ginny went to the door. I'll meet you on the steps, she said to Ron, and went out. The door shut behind her, and Ron and Hermione were alone together in the empty, silent room. Ron crossed his arms over his chest, hugging his elbows as if he were cold. He stared at a point just past Hermione's left ear, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to look directly at her. You can't leave, she said to him. It wasn't what she'd meant to say at all, but there it was. You can't. He still wouldn't look at her. I'm leaving, he said. It's done. You can't leave without talking to Harry, she replied coldly. You owe him an apology at least. Now he looked at her, his blue eyes gone wide with amazement. An apology? Ron's voice was a slap. You think this is something that can be solved with an apology? Hermione, after what I did, he hates me now. But you didn't really do it. Yes, I did. He was hugging himself so hard his knuckles were white. In every way that matters, I did. The question she had promised herself she would not ask burst out of her. Why did you do it? He was silent. After a minute had gone by, he dropped his hands from his elbows and straightened up. Because I love you. He looked away again. Not the love between friends, but the real thing. I have never loved anyone else. Hermione ignored this. You don't love me. Whoever she was, that's who you loved. I thought she was you, Ron burst out. She did a damn good impression of you, Hermione. She had your mannerisms down. Hell, she had your clothes. I know. I saw. Hermione shook her head. 7 years of friendship, she said in an icy voice. And you believed I'd ever do that to Harry? Not everything is about Harry, he said in a deadly cold voice. Bollocks to that, she shot back. This is all about Harry. Ron put a hand up as if to ward off her rage. This is why I have to leave. Because I want to know why? Yes, because you want to know why. And there is no why. His voice was flat with exhaustion. I close my eyes. I see her face. Your face. I was sick all night. His eyes were bleak. I touched her. I spent nights with her. Hours and hours talking. It wasn't just sex, you know. We ate together. We did our potions homework. And I don't even know who she was. Don't try to tell me how much you're suffering. She heard her own voice in her ears and was shocked at its cruel tone. I doubt it could be enough. His mouth hardened. Let me ask you something, Hermione. If I'm so horrible, then why do you want me to stay? Because I can't do this alone. I can't. You can't do what alone? Put Harry back together. Ron looked at her blankly, and she bit her lip. A muscle spasmed next to his mouth. His blue eyes darkened, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. He's been broken for a while now, Hermione, he said, speaking the sentence she didn't dare think. You never saw it, because you didn't want to. That other Hermione? Whoever was pretending to be you, she saw it. She saw it better than we did. She looked at him, then turned away quickly and went to the window. The sky was heavy, leaded gray. The clouds waited with their freight of snow. The only color in the wide expanse of ground before the forest was a cluster of black dots, where some students were having a snowball fight. Hermione closed her eyes, remembering Ron's cold hand in hers, her other hand gripping Harry's. Promise me that we'll always be friends. He can't be broken, she said, not opening her eyes. I won't let him be. What'll you do if he won't let you fix him? That doesn't matter, she said, in the same remote voice. I'd do anything for Harry. Anything. Would you leave him? That made her eyes fly open. She stared at Ron, who stared grimly back, his blue eyes steady. You mean if he wanted me to? No, said Ron. Not exactly. He took a few steps towards her, and then, seemingly assured that she was not going to slap him, came to stand beside her. The grey light from the window cast a sickly pallor over his already pale skin, and Hermione wished she had a pepper-up potion to give him. Then she tried not to wish it. She was, after all, still angry. He took a deep breath. Hermione, I know you won't believe this, because you're too angry, and you have every right to be. And maybe you're right, and all this really is about Harry. After all, what better way to get at him than through you and me? No. Her nails dug into her hands. Don't say that. It's true. You know it is. They used us to get to him. Is that why you're leaving? She asked, in a small thread of a voice. To keep him safe? Maybe. He covered his face with his hands. I don't know. I'd like to think so, but I spent all these months missing him, wondering where he'd gone, where he went. Us, our friendship. I blame Malfoy for all of that being lost. But now I wonder. He took his hands away from his face. I don't think it's Malfoy. I think it's something inside Harry. Something he's obsessed with. I just don't know what it is. He looked at her, hard. Do you? After a long moment, she shook her head. No. And I still don't see how you can justify leaving him. Leaving him? Ron gave a short bark of almost laughter. It was the unhappiest sound she had ever heard. How can I leave him? He's already gone. Hermione looked at him. Why do things have to get this bad before we can talk like this? She whispered. You never said any of these things. I did, Ron said. Just not apparently to you. He looked at her out of haunted eyes. Then the door opened and Ginny came back in. She had her cloak pulled around her. Her cheeks were red with cold. The carriage is here to take you to the station, she said softly. Okay, said Ron slowly, then looked back at Hermione. Ron, she said miserably, but Ginny had already taken her brother's arm and was leading him away. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor and waited until she heard the sound of the door clicking shut before she raised her eyes, and they were gone. Later that morning, Hermione received an owl from Draco, asking her if she would see Harry before they set out for the manor. She thought about it a long time, feeling wrung out after her interaction with Ron. But she had to see Harry. Needed to. So she agreed to meet him later, in neutral territory, the fencing room. She sent an owl back to Draco, then looked around her own room. Then she began to pack. She was nearly finished when the clock struck 11, and she straightened up. She hadn't eaten yet today, and felt dizzy when she stood too quickly. Her haggard reflection in the mirror looked back at her with a sense of distant dismay. An attempt to apply a lip-reddening charm only made her look more washed out. So, with a sigh, she straightened her cardigan and headed out the door. Draco was waiting outside the room when she got there, and Ginny was beside him. They both looked at her, and Ginny smiled wanly. Hermione smiled back as best she could, not wanting Ginny to think that she was angry with her because of the situation with Ron. Then she opened the door and went in. As the door shut behind her, Ginny turned and looked at Draco. He was leaning against the wall, looking tired and wan. How is he? She said, asking the question that had been on her mind when she woke up this morning. Draco looked considering. Rotten, he said finally, his voice flat. Pretty much like you'd expect. I wish there was something I could do, she said, then looked more closely at Draco. How long has it been since you slept? I slept a whole hour last Tuesday. You should get some real sleep, she said firmly. You'll crack otherwise. He shrugged. It's not so bad. I hallucinate occasionally. Yesterday I thought I was a teapot. which wouldn't have been so bad if I hadn't also thought that Malcolm was a teacup. Ginny smiled faintly at him. "Can I tell you something?" he said suddenly. "Something I haven't even told Harry yet." "Is it bad?" she asked. "Not exactly," he said. "I found out who it was." What was? Draco grinned suddenly, a wolfish grin. "Ron's mystery woman." Ginny felt her heartbeat skip and stood up straighter. "What? Who was it?" Draco cocked his head to the side, fair hair falling in his eyes. "Do you really want to know?" Ginny weighed his question in her mind for a moment before saying, "No, I don't think so. Is it someone I know, like a friend or someone Harry cares about?" "No," Draco said, "on all those counts." The wave of relief was so intense it was almost dizzying. "What was it all about, then?" she asked. The light in Draco's eyes flickered. "I don't know for sure." "What are you going to do?" "Investigate," Draco said simply. "I have to look into things. Opportunities, motivation, accomplices, purpose." Ginny felt her lips curve into a shaky smile. "You sound like an aura. Do you need my help?" Draco shook his head. "Not right now. If I do, I'll tell you. And if you want to know, I'll tell you. But not right now." As the door shut behind her, Hermione realized that she was alone in the room with Harry. He looked up as she came in, and for a moment his eyes lit with relief. Then they darkened, and he looked down at the tops of his boots. Hermione took a deep breath. "Hello, Harry," she said. The sound of her voice seemed to galvanize some electric response inside him. His head went up, and he crossed the room to her. She didn't move. He reached out a hand to touch her shoulder, and she stiffened. Slowly, he lowered his arm. He was very pale, and the eyes behind the glasses were intently green. She noticed he was wearing a black sweater that was at least 3 years old, with frayed, far too short cuffs that showed his thin wrists. It was a sweater Ron had given him. She wondered what that meant. He seemed unnerved by her silence. "Hermione," he began, "I'll know it wasn't you." "Well, I'm glad you listened to him," she interrupted shortly. "God knows you wouldn't listen to me." "No, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." He was silent a moment, then said, "You're right. I didn't listen to you. I didn't let myself listen to you. And there's no apology that I could construct that wouldn't make it up to you. I didn't trust you, even though you've never given me a reason not to trust you. I hurt you, and—" "You did hurt me," she interrupted again. "If you'd spent years planning it, I don't think you could have come up with anything that would have hurt me more." He winced, then reached out for her again. "Don't," she said, and this time he put his hands in his pockets. She had stood this way with him so many times. It was familiar, and yet she felt as if she were looking at a stranger. Despite their physical proximity, she had never felt further away from him in her life. "Tell me what to do. There must be something I can do to fix this." "I'll do anything," he said. "Anything you want me to do, Hermione. Help me." "That's all I ever do," she said. "Help you. But I can't if you don't let me." "Let you? I'm asking you, Hermione. I'll apologize to you every day for the rest of your life, if that's what you want. I'll get down on my knees and beg you to forgive me." "I do forgive you," she said. "What?" "I forgive you," she said again. A look of relief so enormous it almost undid all her plans passed over his face. He ducked his head, and she looked at him. The slightness of his body, the fragile bones, the sharp blades of his shoulders made her want to protect him again, but this was one thing she could not protect him against. "I forgive you," she said once more, "but that doesn't mean things are going to be like they were." He looked up sharply, the look of relief beginning to fade from his expression. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You don't really think things can be the same again, do you?" she asked. "Not after what happened." "Nothing happened," he said fiercely. "I was a git, that's all. Nothing happened to us." "That's not true, Harry. You showed me something important yesterday. You showed me you don't trust me. You don't trust anyone, and I know why." He just stared at her. From the look in his green eyes, she could tell he was dreading her next words, and she wished in some way she could spare him, even if she knew that this was necessary. "You lied to me, so you imagined that I could lie to you," she said, her voice very flat. "You hide things from me, so it makes sense to you that I could hide something so huge, so horrible from you, and pretend as if everything was all right. It makes me wonder, how bad is it, Harry?" He went very white and stared at her. "It has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with how I feel about you." "That's where you're wrong," she said, suddenly furious. "I'm your friend, your best friend, and I'm your girlfriend too. And I'm sick of asking and getting evasive answers, or no answer at all. I love you, and it kills me to see you suffering, Harry. But it makes it 10,000 times worse when you won't even tell me what's it all about. You can't keep some huge secret and expect it to be separate from the rest of your life. It doesn't work that way. We don't work that way. I'm not Draco. I can't read your mind, but I can see what you're feeling. It shows on your face." She waited, braced for him to say anything, to say something angry or bitter or defensive. He raised his head to look at her finally, and she was shocked at the look in his eyes, the bleakness in it, the despair. "So, are you going to leave me?" he asked. "Because of this?" "Harry," she whispered, wanting more than anything to go and throw her arms around him. Wanted it badly, but she held herself tight where she was. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. "I'm not leaving you. I could never really leave you. I'll still be with you, Harry, just not the way we were." "In other words," Harry interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp, "we should still be friends." She stared at him. "Well, I can't be your girlfriend," she said. "That's what's got to be different." "Can't or won't?" "I don't know, Harry," she replied despairingly. "When you say you can't tell me what's bothering you, do you mean you can't tell me, or you won't tell me?" He looked as if she had slapped him. "That's not fair." "It's completely fair." She hugged herself tightly, willing herself not to cry. "I love you," he said. "Please don't go." "Then tell me," she said, without turning to look at him. "Tell me what it is you've been hiding. Tell me, Harry. Please." His silence was the only answer she needed. She shut her eyes, willing her voice to remain even. When she did speak, she was startled at the calmness of her tone. "I'm leaving school, Harry," she said. "I'm packed, and I'm taking the train out of Hogsmeade to London today. If you want to say goodbye to me, I'll wait for you on the platform. I hope you'll come. I do love you. I will always love you. Believe that, even if you don't believe anything else." He was still silent, although she could hear his uneven breathing, and she wanted very much to turn around, but she didn't. Blindly, she walked towards the door, and blindly turned the knob, and blindly stepped out into the corridor. Draco and Ginny were still there, staring at her silently, but now her vision was so blurred with tears that they looked like distorted, funhouse versions of themselves. She saw Draco reach a hand out to her, and a voice from a long way away asked her, "What happened?" She shook her head. "Go in there," she said. "Take care of him." And then she fled down the corridor without looking back. Ginny looked at Draco. Not surprisingly, he was looking away from her, down the corridor where Hermione had fled. "She shouldn't be by herself," he said. "I know," Ginny said. "Do you want me to go after her?" He nodded slowly and brought his eyes back to hers. "You should. I'm not particularly good at girl talk." Ginny sighed. "I'm not sure I am either. All those brothers." She trailed off. "Still, you'd better talk to Harry. Whatever happened, he'll tell you." Draco sounded thoughtful, then asked, "What about Finnegan?" Ginny was taken aback. "What about him?" "Well, shouldn't he be around through all this or something? Lending you a massive, unsightly shoulder to lean on? Like at the Quidditch match?" "You saw that?" she asked. "Not deliberately," he admitted. "And how did it make you feel?" she asked, knowing that the answer might pain her. "We've got enough broken hearts around here already," he said, and pushed the door open with his left hand. "No sense you worrying about mine right now." Ginny opened her mouth to reply, but caught a brief glimpse of Harry sitting on the floor of the empty room, and decided that now wasn't the time to pursue that statement. So instead, she turned and headed off down the corridor after Hermione. It was a small flight of steps and a turn to get to Hermione's room. The door was closed when she got there, and she raised her hand to knock, then hesitated, trying to think what she should say. She had no idea what Hermione might be feeling, and no idea if she would hate seeing Ginny at this moment. After all, she was still Ron's sister. She slowly lowered her hand, and on impulse put her ear to the door. Hermione was crying. Ginny could hear it very clearly. It was a terribly sad and desperate sound, the way a child might cry. It was the crying of someone who knows they have lost something they will never get back. Ginny hesitated, one hand on the doorknob. Then she slowly stepped back and leaned against the wall. She slid slowly down it until she was sitting on the floor. Then she put her hand on her knees and did not move for a long time. Hermione and Ginny had been standing shivering on the platform for nearly an hour, when the redhead finally looked at the other girl with regret in her eyes. "I don't think he's coming, Hermione," she said. Hermione took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I guess I should have expected it," she replied. The Hogsmeade train station was utterly deserted, except for her and Ginny, who were the only two people on the empty platform. She had been grateful that the redhead had wanted to walk her down to the station, and even more grateful that she hadn't bombarded her with endless questions about Harry. Silently, she turned and gave Ginny a brief hug, then turned and climbed wearily onto the train and went into the nearest compartment, where she sat down close to the window and propped her chin on her hand. From here, she could see the lights of the castle glimmering on the cliff top in the distance. The mountains behind were wreathed in mist, a shroud of vapor around the sun. She felt the sting of tears fierce at the back of her eyes, and then she heard it, the sound of running footsteps on the platform. She stood up so fast she nearly banged her head on the overhead luggage rack. Swiftly, she seized at the window and pulled it up, hard, leaning out as far as she could. Someone was running along the platform towards the train. A slender, shadowy figure, turned to a silhouette by the mist. She saw a black cloak, recognized the school clothes, and then, as he emerged from the shadows, she saw in the torchlight that the banding at the wrists of his cloak was green and silver, and she realized with a queer stab at her heart that it was not Harry after all, but Draco. "I'm here!" she shouted, and he turned and blinked at her. "Draco!" He came to stand next to Ginny below the train window, throwing the hood of his cloak back. He was flushed with exertion, his hair a crackling white halo around his head. Flakes of melting snow clung to the dark silver blades of his lashes. "I know I'm not who you were expecting," he said in a low voice. "I had an idea you might leave, and came as quickly as I could." Her voice shook. "But he wouldn't." Draco shook his head, a firm negative. "He wouldn't come." "Oh." She blinked back tears. "Did he send you?" "Not exactly," Draco said, then looked over at Ginny. "I'm glad you came down with her." Ginny shrugged. "I didn't like the thought of her going off with no one to say goodbye." He looked at her in surprise, but it was Hermione who spoke, and his eyes trailed back to her. "I need you to promise me something," she began, and reached out the window to touch his shoulder. He didn't move, only his eyes narrowed slightly. "It's about Harry," she continued, before chancing a glance at Ginny. "They used me to get to him. They used me and Ron. They know how to hurt him the worst, and I can't be a part of that. I won't be." "Did you tell him that?" Ginny asked. She shook her head. "No, he wouldn't understand." "Try him," said Draco firmly. She sighed. "No, he still wouldn't tell me what's been tormenting him, and She bowed her head down. "I don't suppose either of you know?" "No," said Ginny into the still air. Draco, however, said nothing, only looked up at her. There was no reading his expression, as he had nothing of Harry's transparency. "I still think you should talk to Harry again," he said stubbornly. "You shouldn't have to go. Not like this." The train whistle sounded then, a long, high-piercing shriek that made them all jump. Ginny took a step away from the train. "I want you to promise, Draco," Hermione cried out, close to despair. "Swear it on your family honor. Swear it on your own name." He was properly alarmed now. "Swear what?" "Stay with him," she said. Beside him, Draco felt Ginny go very still. "Stay with him always," Hermione continued. "Watch him, and make sure he's all right. Don't leave him, and don't let him go off on his own. And if he does, you have to follow him. Keep him safe for me. Promise me, please." There was a long silence. It stretched out between the three of them like a length of silver cord, unspooling. Hermione stared down at Draco, and he seemed so far away, as if he had gone beyond the mountains, into some cold place she couldn't imagine. His face was still expressionless, and when he finally spoke, his voice was as slow as it was steady. "Very well," he said. "I promise." She might have imagined it, but she thought she felt something leap between them, like an electrical spark. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would have done it anyway," he said remotely, looking down at his shoulder, where her hand still rested. "I know," she said, and retracted her hand slowly. "But now you have to." The train whistle sounded again, shrill as a scream. The next few moments were a blur. She continued to stare at him, wondering at what she had just done, at what she had just made him do. Hermione grabbed at the window's edge to steady herself and leaned as far out as safety allowed, the cold stinging her eyelids, staring back towards the lighted platform and the two figures standing there, looking after her. They did not wave farewell, and neither did she, only stood watching as the platform and the station and Draco and Ginny grew smaller and smaller in the distance, and finally vanished altogether, swallowed up by the encroaching mist. After the train had gone, the two that had been left behind stood silent for several moments, looking after it. "Do you think she understands?" Ginny said finally, not looking at him, but instead at the place where Hermione had vanished into the distance. "The vow she just made you swear?" Draco didn't look at her either, but felt suddenly colder than usual. "No," he said after a fashion. "How could she? Hermione was born a muggle, after all. Only you and I know the gravity of what has just passed between us. Perhaps it's for the best." Hours later, Ginny was to be found riding the train from Hogsmeade back to King's Cross Station in a train compartment with Harry and Draco. Both boys were silent, which was to be expected. Draco was watching Harry from across the way, and Ginny could see the vow Hermione had made him swear already taking effect. Harry, however, barely seemed to notice anything had changed. He was staring out the window, watching the winter world outside as it slid by, and Ginny thought he looked translucent, as if he had been very ill, the bones showing sharply under his skin. As the journey progressed, she noticed that Draco had pulled his cloak up higher on his shoulders and was now leaning against the wall of the compartment, apparently asleep. Ginny watched him for a moment before looking up and saw Harry was now looking away from the window and caught her eye. "Hey, Harry," she said, not knowing what else to say. "Hey," he replied, then looked down at Draco. "I guess Malfoy finally found some time to crash out, huh?" His tone was conversational, but Ginny could hear the strain underneath it. "Best to get it in now," she returned, "because I don't think either of you are going to get any sleep after Sirius's stag party tonight." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "True," he replied, and they lapsed into an awkward silence for several minutes. Then Harry said, "Hey, Ginny, there's something I've been meaning to ask you for a while now, but there never seemed to be a right moment." She raised an eyebrow at him, surprised. "Me? What did you want to ask me about?" He looked past her at the moving scenery outside. "I know that you can sometimes sense dark magic if it presents in objects or people. I was wondering if you would take a look at something for me. Let me know if you feel anything unusual about it." Ginny fidgeted with the gold chain around her throat. "Of course." "Thanks." Harry bent his head, then looked up at her again quickly. "It's on my belt. Hang on a second," he said, and slid his leather belt through the loops on his trousers. "Here," he said, and held out his hand. She took what he offered. It was a heavy circle of what looked like red glass, but it was much heavier than that. Its weight in her hand was as substantial as if it had been carved out of stone. She turned it over slowly, marveling at its smooth texture, despite the engravings all around the edges. "Do you feel anything?" he asked her, eyes anxious. She shook her head. "No, nothing." She handed it back to him, and he took it, unsmiling. "You weren't hoping it'd be something evil?" she asked, half-jokingly, but he seemed to take the question seriously. "No, not really, but I was hoping for some kind of clue as to what it is," he said. "I hate not knowing things." Ginny wanted to tell him that that was precisely the reason why Hermione had left him, but the comment seemed cruel, so she kept it to herself. Instead, she merely nodded and turned to her own window to watch the trees and landscape slide by as they continued their trek back to platform 9 3/4. After they had disembarked onto King's Cross, Harry and Draco both said goodbye to her as they made their way towards Sirius and Narcissa, who had come to take them home. Ginny waved, then turned away to see her own mom and dad coming towards her from the other side of the platform. She was just about to make her way over to them when a voice spoke low in her ear. "Ginny." She turned and saw with surprise that it was Seamus. He had his hands in his pockets and a black watch cap pulled down over his light hair. He smiled when she looked at him. "Seamus," she said, feeling delighted and perplexed all at once. "What are you doing here? I thought you already left to go home to Ireland for the holidays." "I did, but I wanted to come by and say Happy Christmas to you." "Happy Christmas," she said, then raised an eyebrow. "You really didn't come all this way just to say that, did you? You know that's what owls are for, right?" Seamus opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, Charlie had come up behind the two of them, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley weren't long behind. For a moment there was utter chaos, as Mrs. Weasley hugged and kissed both her children, and Mr. Weasley gave Charlie's hand a proud shake, before the latter left the group to go talk to Sirius and Narcissa. It wasn't until after these greetings had been exchanged that Mrs. Weasley finally noticed Seamus. "Oh, hello," she said. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you standing there, dear. Ginny, who is this nice young man?" "This is Seamus, Mum," said Ginny. "He's the same year as Ron and Harry, and my teammate on the Quidditch team." Mr. Weasley held out a hand to Seamus. "Nice to meet you, Seamus." "Nice to meet you too, sir," Seamus replied, and shook Mr. Weasley's hand firmly. "My mum has always spoken very highly of you. She says you're the best Minister of Magic Britain's had since Felonious Plum." Mr. Weasley flushed with pleasure and pumped Seamus's hand with renewed vigor. "Well, well," he said, "that's good to hear, very good to hear. Will we be seeing your family at the wedding, then?" Seamus shook his head regretfully. "No, I'm not affiliated with either the bride or groom." "Ah, well, that's all right," said Mr. Weasley kindly. "It was nice to have met you regardless. If you please excuse me, I think I see Professor Lupin over there, and I wanted to have a word with him real quick." "Come along, Molly," he said to his wife. "Let's not bother the young people when it's obvious they want to be left alone to chat." Mrs. Weasley, who had been looking at Seamus like he might be the answer to all her prayers as far as grandchildren were concerned, flushed slightly pink as she began to follow her husband to where Lupin was standing not too far away. "Arthur, really? Hasn't a mother a right to be curious?" she was saying now, before turning back briefly to smile at Seamus. "You two say your goodbyes, but, Seamus, don't feel like you have to be a stranger. Ginny, you be sure to invite him over for dinner sometime after the wedding, all right?" Ginny turned slowly to Seamus, who was wearing a smirk that would have done a Malfoy proud. "What are you looking so smug about?" she asked. Seamus opened his dark blue eyes very wide. "Your mum thinks we're dating. Don't mind me as I bask in the euphoria." "Well, I'd hate to ruin your euphoria, but my mother thinks any boy I happen to stand in the same room with might be a potential mate," she said, but was smiling now. He shrugged. "A boy can dream, can't he?" Ginny looked at him quickly, and what Draco had said during the night of the pub crawl came flooding back to her. "Don't be surprised if he asks you one day." "Was that the real reason you came to see me today?" she asked, not wanting to have any secrets between them. Watching Harry and Hermione the last couple of days had let her know what she didn't want out of a relationship. "In a way," he said, "and also to give you this." He reached into a pocket of his cloak and drew out a small box. It was not the sort of box you put books or clothing in. It was most definitely a jewelry box. "What is that?" Ginny asked hastily. But instead of answering, he merely handed her the box, and she hesitated. "Take it," he said gently. "It's your Christmas present." She took it, vaguely wondering if her mother was watching all this, and hoping desperately that she wasn't. She had never given Seamus any indication that she wanted a relationship. None. So why was he all gung-ho all of a sudden? "Go on," he said. She opened the box. Inside, on a bed of brightly colored tissue, lay a bracelet. And not just any kind of bracelet. The tag attached proclaimed it to be a Porti Bon Heur enchantment charm bracelet. Ginny almost dropped the box. Charm bracelets were both very expensive and very famous, because each charm had to be handcrafted with intricate spells. In fact, she'd never met anyone who owned one. The bracelet itself was a delicate but unremarkable band of silver links, but the charms themselves were what was interesting. A tiny musical note, a small golden candelabra, a miniature arrow, a glass heart, a dish and a spoon, a little quill. "One of my uncles makes them," Seamus said. "Just throw the charm into the fire and it'll activate it." "I can't accept this, Seamus," she said, and closed the box very carefully and handed it back to him. He glanced up at her through his eyelashes, all the merriment of the previous conversation gone. "Perhaps it's a bit silly of me to use a Christmas gift as a way of asking you to be my girlfriend, but I'm really not good at this sort of thing. Does that mean you don't want to?" "Look, Seamus, I like you. You're very sweet. But I've discovered that it's a really, really bad idea to go against my instincts. The last time I did that, well, it didn't work out so well for me." Seamus nodded. He had taken the box back and put it into his pocket again. "Ginny, I know I said I wouldn't pry, but I have to know. Is it Malfoy? I won't say anything, or judge you. I just want to understand." Ginny took a deep breath, then began, for the first time, to put into words how she had been feeling. "I think I'm in love with Draco," she said. "And normally there wouldn't be anything wrong with that, but he has feelings for Hermione. The friendship was meant to be a secret, but you asked, so I'm telling you now. I'd like to be able to get over him and move on to some other boy in the future. But the way I feel right now, I'm not ready. Does this make any sense at all?" During her recitation, Seamus's face had turned from surprise to realization to resignation, all in the span of a minute. He stood looking at her, then opened his mouth to reply, but her parents were back, and now Mrs. Weasley was tugging Ginny towards the car. Seamus had just enough time to grasp her hand briefly and give a little nod before they were pulled apart, and Ginny's mother led her away, talking excitedly into her ear as they walked. Ginny made out only some of the words. "So polite, such nice manners, and so handsome too." She nodded without replying as she looked back towards the platform, watching Seamus recede into the distance until he was lost from view. And that is the end of this chapter, guys. So, some of you who might be familiar with this particular fanfiction might have noticed something, and I'm going to divulge a little bit here, but not a lot. In subsequent chapters at the end, I will explain more. But Seamus is not going to make an appearance throughout the rest of this story. And that was not what was originally written. I cut it out. And the reason that I cut it out was for a few reasons, but one of them I won't tell you until later. The first one I will tell you now. The reason is because Seamus became part of a subplot later on in the book that was really annoying. And I really feel like Cassandra Clare, so she was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. I mean, much like I was. Most of us were in the early aughts, most of us spooky girlies. And I really, really feel that she wrote Seamus, or I should say the way she wrote Seamus, was very much like the Riley character from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So he was kind of more macho, more like, I'm inserting myself in this thing and I'm protecting Ginny and I hate Draco and, And Seamus was also extremely possessive of Ginny, even though they weren't dating. I mean, not really, not officially or anything like that. And it gave me the ick, it gave me the ick back then. It made Seamus's character really unlikable. So I didn't want any of that. I didn't think that it was fair to either Seamus's character, or Ginny either, because the way Ginny was sort of treating Seamus in the original iteration of this particular fanfic was she was kind of using him, because she wasn't getting the kind of attention she wanted from Draco, so she was just like, well, I'm just gonna date this other guy and hopefully it'll make Draco jealous. And it was just so ridiculous. And I understand that Ginny is a teenager, and like teenagers do make those stupid mistakes like all the time, but it also didn't feel true to who Ginny was as a person. And even though, like, back in the day, we didn't really have a personality for Ginny yet, because the latter books had not come out, so I know Cassandra Clare was, like, fashioning a personality for her. And what she had created was really annoying. So I just didn't think that it was fair. And now, since we have a more concrete version of Ginny, there's enough in this fanfiction for me to tweak it to make Ginny more likable. Like, the fanfic itself is gigantic, so it just took a little bit of tweaking and a lot of taking out of stuff just to fix these issues. Now, that isn't to say that the subplot that involved Seamus isn't going to come back into play, but it isn't going to come back into play the way that it was originally. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And yes, I will see you all in the next one. I have a Ko-fi and a Patreon if you guys are interested at all supporting me monetarily. The links are on my About section here on YouTube. And again, thank you so much, and good night.